yeah, we're 5 minutes in, and uh, Sean's good at talking, so I want to give plenty of time to hear about everything that's going on. So we'll go ahead and get started here, and if other people join, they'll just have to catch up with wherever we're at. So hello to everyone out there. My name is Derek Ham, and I'm one of the people who helps put on the Tallgrass Artist Residency, which is a pretty small residency. We think of ourselves as small, and then every so often someone you know knows about us from far away, and we're like, oh, are we big? But behind the scenes, we really are quite small. So I was going to say some really glowing things about Kelly Yarborough, was the founder and who I run it with, but then she popped on screen, so now it would be too awkward. So Kelly's okay. She's fine, but if you see another person whose name is Tallgrass Artist Residency, it's legit. That's Kelly. And so her and I and my wife Catherine are involved in putting on the program. Bill and Julia McBride are the owners of the place where Sean and Ruth actually also are staying at the moment, and they are sort of also hosts and really the whole town of Matfield Green, Kansas, in one way or the other, is kind of a host for the residency. So if for some reason you haven't heard of Matfield Green at this point, it's a town of about 50 people in the middle of the Flint Hills, the Tallgrass Prairie, which kind of gives the mission to the residency. The other people we have to plug are the Kansas Creative Arts and Industries Commission, and Peter there. They're kind of who makes the program possible with some funding that comes through from the NEA. So we like our public art programs as well, and so got to give a shout out to those. And then since Ruth is here, I need to make a plug for this too. So Ruth Borum Loveland, in the orange, very lined up with the orange on the background. I appreciate how you did that. She'll have a Zoom Q&A on Sunday at 4 p.m. So make a note of that. I sent an email out about it if you're on the Tallgrass email list a little earlier today, and we'll try to send out some reminders on those as the week goes on. But today, we don't care about Ruth. She's just an audience member. We're here for Sean. So I'll turn things over to Sean Nash, who's been out for 9. This is your last day, 10th day.
I mean, I'll leave tomorrow morning if that's all right.
Okay. Yeah. So 10 days on the prairie to share a little bit of his experience, and then we'll have time for questions. If you have things during the sort of presentation part at the beginning, you can type them in on the chat, or once we go into more of a Q&A time, feel free to just turn your microphone on for a second and ask away. So Sean, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I want it to be somewhat conversational, so if you want to type things as I go, I will try to look at them. First of all, thank you to everyone, to Derek and Kelly, to the McBrides, whose land I've been traveling on and walking around for the last 9 days. And so I'll tell you about those experiences, but I want to thank all of you for making this happen. And then for those of you attending today, I appreciate your attendance. I'm kind of curious, among those of you who are here, have you been out to the Flint Hills? Have you experienced this region? Just to type like a yes or no in the chat if you want to participate. And I do see Dora. Dora's one of the artists that was here earlier. So I'm just curious. So I'll see your answers coming in, but I'm curious because I guess what I'm going to talk about, knowing whether or not you've been here and experienced this place, I think from my perspective, and having moved to Kansas from New York about 4 years ago, we were immediately drawn to this area for a lot of really, really special reasons. And I think those special reasons have just become clearer to me as I've spent these 9 days walking the paths here and seeing so much uh, native flora. I'd like to go ahead and share my screen, so I'm going to do that and get into it. Okay, cool. Let's see. All right, so to start, I want to tell you how I've been conducting my days. I came here really needing this energy of rest and grounding and relaxation, and just kind of collecting myself and allowing myself to play. And every day I've been drawing a card from the Flower Essences deck. My wife just got these before I left, and I told her I was stealing them to bring them with me so that I could have an oracle for my experience. And today's flower card was Dandelion. Most of the cards that I've pulled have been things I've either grown myself or foraged, and I just think that's been really interesting. So Dandelion is something I've foraged, both flowers and the roots. And today it's patterns of balance, dynamic physical energy, and expressive life force, inner ease, and work and play. So hopefully you all can tell me if I'm living up to the energy of Dandelion by the end of this chat. So a couple days into my trip here, I woke up to this misty morning, and here we are on this 40 acres of re-established, restored prairie. So there are these beautiful mowed paths all around the 40 acres of the McBrides, and there's just a diversity of life. There's a hummingbird feeder right on the porch, so hummingbirds are coming up and like fighting for this nectar. But misty mornings are like my favorite thing in the world, and they remind me of East Tennessee. So my parents are from East Tennessee. I grew up in Memphis, and they now live in East Tennessee again. And most of the mornings have just this beautiful misty quality in the low hills. And there's just kind of nothing better in the world to me than this display of mistiness. I love the morning. And so the energy, the sort of creative energy of morning, waking up and just feeling really, really alive with this like mystical quality of the day it just set everything off in such a right way. This is another picture from that day with the mist droplets, dew droplets, collecting on that spider web. So all the spider webs just became really alive in the grasses, and you could kind of see these things that were otherwise harder to see in full sunlight. So this is me at Matfield Station, and this is where the artists have our residency. On the porch there is a table. So I set up when the shade would allow me to set up out there to work most days. And I found myself like more interested in the train than I thought I would be. It, as you can see between the pictures, and it's coming by right now. It's about to come by. I thought we might miss it because there was one at 3:53, but we'll see if you can hear me. So, or if I can hear myself. Wait for the engine. Okay. So this juxtaposition between the two pictures of this kind of place that where you could kind of ignore global commerce. You could maybe check out of the global scenarios that we're in, and then having this message roll by of no, you're still constantly in touch with what actually brought you here, which is like wheels and oil and all the things that we might want to distract ourselves from is still right here. And it brought me back to some earlier fascination I had with um, globalization and shipping containers that I'll talk about in a minute. Um, but on the first full day I was here, I also watched this New York Times documentary. It's like a short new documentary on pandemics and how uh, pandemics will increase just because of human habitats and human exploitation and extraction of the land have made it such that globalization has has pushed species right to um, uh, new and more enclosed areas, and then human contact with animals has just increased. And so I was feeling that sense of pervasiveness of globalization and this kind of this train wreck, literally, of these overlapping circumstances that we're in that are very, very overwhelming and very difficult. And yet I was reminded of play nonetheless, because and this talk is kind of framed around play as this generative and creative and intuitive response to some of the insanity and difficulty. And so this work is from 2006, and it's called South China Sea Ships. At the time, I was really interested in um, territory, like the yellow uh, metal is the South China Sea, just this little piece of land that's being fought over continually and still by the nations that surround it. And the ships are the sort of movable pawns in that scenario, and they represent capitalism, they represent trade and globalization. And I think looking at it, it also represents this kind of like flat earth or flattened earth kind of principle, where earth is reduced, or the commodities extracted from earth are reduced to a kind of unit, and that unit is expressed in the ship or in the shipping container. It also represents like a kind of normativity, that unit normativity in capitalism. So taking all these things and then also being reminded that the building blocks, or the blocks, what do I have next? The blocks here, the train is representative of play, because there are these really archetypal toys that we play with, such as trains and cars and things of that nature. So I got to thinking about play from a lot of different senses, and looking back over the time that I've spent here involved in play, and thinking about play and invention and creative activity and intuition being driven by perhaps what's available. So like, yeah, whatever, just looking around you and picking things up and using those things to build and create. But then thinking about these toys, these shipping containers or blocks or things that have a kind of unit of representation that distills into a commodity, or even allow, like, has children sort of being the drivers of a kind of mini capitalism, that children's play then becomes um, this sort of fantasy of power and control, and then the obverse of that, playing in the wild and allowing yourself to get lost among living things and living creatures and learn from them, and what those differences are. And playing with either thing can have those results, um, but I think about the structure of that, the meaning, the intention of maybe both of those things, and this juxtaposition of the train with this landscape sort of led me to that. This image is of a really dense little patch of flora here with some melons. So there's like this viney melon. I don't know what it is exactly, what kind of melon. They're the small yellow derivative of. They sort of look more like cucumbers, right? Because they're in the same family. But I found this interesting because, and I was drawn to it just because of that relationship between like cultivation, cultivars, like agriculture, um, and the sort of wildness or at least diversity that's been brought back to this specific patch of land. So I'm just interested in that conversation, both here and then in what I think about with food. Um, Gotta get back to this. All right. So I went to the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve on Friday and took a walk that I hadn't done before that led me to this schoolhouse. And the conversation of play became really clear with this image of the swing set with these dangling chains, and it's sort of rusted and there aren't any seats, and the structure of the schoolhouse itself being kind of this institutional marker. And then I'm thinking about what I'm going to see. Like, I want to trek out and see the bison. That's my goal. But yet I start thinking about, like, well, whose playground is this? This is a very like institutional playground. It's timed play. And then there's this really small last sort of group of bison here on this very, very small bit of remaining prairie. And the question just kept returning to me, like, well, whose playground? And thinking about stolen land, and thinking about just this kind of like diminishing part of Earth that sort of has this allowable, controlled, contained sense of the past or what was, um, and perhaps honoring the sense of connection and connectivity and play that may have taken place on the land, that wasn't this image of this institution of white settlers having come in. And now, not knowing everything about the school, the history of the school, that's my impression and my understanding of it. So just really contrasting these ways of learning, thinking about over the time here, what does learning, who are my teachers? There's my question. Like, who are my teachers? What have I learned from? There's a lot of things I am actively learning and unlearning within myself all the time, but bringing to this experience a kind of quiet and uh, reflection on who I've learned from, um, and honoring that ancestrally, really thinking about experiences with my family. You know, my mother was a kindergarten teacher. My father was a research scientist, and you know, my mother um, was absolutely a proponent and a practitioner of experiential learning and play. And then, you know, they both had a scientific background in science education. So I was always interested in this marriage of both, and really thinking about like how I came to be here, who I am, you know, intergenerational relationships. And so I have these two books here because this is who I brought with me during this time to read from. And this is Braiding Sweetgrass with Robin Wall Kimmerer, and Love and Rage, written by Lama Rod Owens. And I've been, well, I have a quote, I guess, from Braiding Sweetgrass, which is regarding science. And she says, science is rigorous in separating the observer from the observed, and the observed from the observer. So that's something else I've brought to this experience, and I'll get to the microscope here in a second. So thinking about the microscope that comes up as this tool of observation and perception, but she talks about this rift as being, you know, she was told that she was misguided to think that science could explain why two flowers like to live next to each other, like to be next to each other. Oh, we don't explain, you know, we don't get into that. That's beauty or aesthetics or philosophy or whatever. But in fact, there are really real reasons why plants need to be together. So in talking about who are my teachers and thinking about here, the land itself, the plants, allowing them to talk to me through their waving and being and communicating, sending pollen and seeds right now. So I was reminded through all this and through this conversation of science and creativity, really, of a piece I made, and having started to work with the image of a microscope in like 2004. So I'm bringing all this old stuff back up for a lot of different reasons. But here, this piece, you know, the cut collages, cut paper collages on the outside, framing the edge, are kind of insinuation of the sort of kaleidoscopic world to be seen under the microscope. But the microscope itself, I always thought it was funny that the microscope has these labels, this test, you know, where you like put in the name the parts of the microscope, and it's like, here, name and remember all the things about the thing you use to name things. It's like this relationship with the microscope that's, you know, we see through it, we name things through it, and we have to know and study it as well. It's just always been this kind of ironic image for me. So here I brought the microscopes to the residency after having worked with them for a show that, if I have time, I'll get into. But I've been using these for rubbings and drawings. And in wanting to get back to, well, I wanted to use the residency to get back into image making as a place of joy, as a place of just finding like coincidence and finding a sort of temporality in drawing itself that I had lost for a little while. Not lost, but just maybe not practiced in the same way. I think image making for me is it's just a really different temporal experience and bodily somatic kind of experience than it is to make sculpture, which there's just a different amount of planning, and the sort of path that I might take in trusting myself to make a drawing is different in the way that I might trust myself to make a sculpture. Or so allowing myself to play and watch the forms take shape, and then just allow coincidence to happen and allow myself to work with color. And I say allow myself because I do think that there's something about it that I needed to like come back to. So I had to get back here in making images. And so I got really fascinated as well with this willow leaf sunflower. It's tall and it's like it's everywhere, and it's got this willow-like thin leaf. So I made a stamp of it and used it in a couple of drawings. So in this one that you see behind me, it's a rubbing of the microscope that's like transforming into a kind of flower or sun form or radiant form with that willow leaf sunflower stamped around it. So just spending my time as well using it to make marks and to draw. I want to check the time, but I think, yeah, we're good. So I wrote this today just thinking about and wanting to introduce some of you to my work if you didn't know it, that for the last 6 years I've been using food fermentation in my work. And so typically in shows I'll make a sculpture and have some element of fermented food incorporated in it. The food is usually eaten, so I kind of think of the sculptures as being like turned on or activated when the ferments are with them. But here, I wanted to talk a little bit about the microscope as a figure and kind of why I'm using the microscope as a figure and what it does. And it like occupies a couple of different places for me. Like I think of it as myself, as a sort of figure stand-in for a thing that can observe and can look closely, but is also like maybe a little out of place sometimes. There's a trans identity that I locate within the microscope that has a lot to do, I think, as well with needing medicine, needing science to personally like assist me and aid me in medical transition. So there is this kind of figure of the microscope as a scientific tool that represents or stands in for science, which in modern contemporary times has allowed transgender people to fully become who we need to be, and yet it also is this sort of sort of questionable sense of like observer observed, again, asking questions about that relationship, the relationship that we can sense from other beings that like we don't really totally need a microscope to tap into, but yet still needing that science, needing science itself to take us forward. So so I wrote just like make that the microscope is making things known or sensed, that communication among all non-human things is not only happening, and then I said everywhere with energetic force, but that non-human entities are actually more maybe social and sociable than human ones, that they tend to know how to signal and to assist other species. And then I sort of turned into thinking like, I don't know if we do this very well, right? We actually kind of capitalize on suffering and exploitation. Um, but that it's this opening of a relationship, and the more we know, the more we sort of see, especially about the microbiome or about our universe, about dark matter. You can go into any of these sort of crevices of like, yeah, we're just on the precipice of that, like we barely know about that thing. And I think that place is, the fascinating sort of point for me, of where we're just sort of bumping up against what we know about literally anything. And this, it's very humbling, and actually quite, I think, wonderful to relate to things on, a level of, um, more of an embodied level, more of a serious sensory relationship with living and non-living things in terms of their own agency, rather than just thinking of explaining and classifying and things like that. So moving out of that, having a bit of paradigm shift, hopefully, and sort of moving out of that need to qualify and quantify and explain and name everything. So this show, crowdsourcing, happened. Uh, let's see. Well, anyway, in the past year, ended in February, I think. Um, so I collected for crowdsourcing. I collected all of the. Well, I asked for. Here's the better way to put it. I asked for participation in crowdsourcing. I'm honestly just also waiting for the stream to stop because it's distracting. Okay. Um, so I asked for participation in the show in the Boston area, and asked for as many people as possible to bring sauerkraut to the show. So in this slide, you can see me at the show, using my microscope, and um, and next to it is an image of all the microbes that were in the kraut that people brought, that were mixed into a big super kraut, a collective kraut, and we ate it, and we looked at it under the microscope, and it was like really teeming with all kinds of great stuff. Um, and my kraut that was on display in the show with these sculptures, was like, it had just started, and it had not even half, not even, I don't even, just a minuscule amount of what was found in that collective kraut. So there's sort of this metaphor of the collective and sort of diversity in the collective, and that experience of people were a little bit weirded out to taste the collective kraut, and it was like, oh, this is really good, because it just was good. Um, all that stuff together. Um, so yeah, so this is another piece, of brassica cultivars. So in the show about cabbage, about sauerkraut, I wanted to, talk about all of brassica's cultivars, and this idea of lineage and relationship in agriculture. And yeah, so I think bringing that back here, and sort of wrapping up on that sense of play, like going from an interest in cultivars and talking about, sauerkraut from this perspective, both of like genealogy and lineage, which is something else I was investigating with my family and family heritage. And then also coming here and thinking about family, in a sense, or heritage wisdom coming from my teachers and who I've learned from, who's built me, and looking at the land and sort of recognizing um, that kind of, teaching and wisdom is like, here in this like wildness and diversity as well. So I'm wrapping up all of that, which hopefully tied together just with the theme of play, at least if we want to like talk about that more, with the sunset. So from sunrise to sunset, which like both have been really beautiful. And I'll conclude with that so we can talk and
Yeah, we have a softball question for you right away. Did you
okay.
bring any fermented things with you to the residency?
I brought a cranberry kombucha jun beverage. Yeah, that was it though. I didn't bring my sauerkraut.
Do you have to get like instead of a pet sitter, do you have to get like a sitter when you go away or?
Well, I see my sitter there. No, I don't think my wife Lori joined the call. I don't think she doesn't really take care of the ferments. They kind of run themselves. They're pretty independent.
I've been eating all of the okra ferments that you left behind, though.
Yeah, good. Do you
Darn.
know? Yeah, and anyone chime in with questions, or you can put them in the chat if you'd rather. Do you know if there would be any sort of like native prairie plants that would have been used that would have been fermented in order to be eaten, to your knowledge?
We
Or?
talked about Ruth, Lori, and I talked about this, and so the only thing I knew about even really was prairie turnip, but I didn't know how big it was. I think it seems like, and if anybody knows differently, please tell me. But I think it seems like things were mostly dried for preservation. But please help me out if anybody knows. I don't know. Is a better answer.
Yeah. Other questions from folks for Sean?
Ask one. I was taking notes as you were talking, Sean. Thank you for that talk. That was cool to hear more about your work, past and present. I wrote as you were talking about image making, getting back to image making, the joy of image making, and how that is maybe different from, I think you compared it to sculpture making. But I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about the difference of what you ask of yourself in these different roles. I mean, you have a vibrant community practice as well, and all those probably ask different things of you. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, well, yeah. So maybe can I hear your question like again?
Yeah. I was just I was musing on the different expectations that that you might have as a multidisciplinary artist, we'll say. And you mentioned that you're in this place right now where you are exploring some joy in image making. And I'm just curious if you have any other thoughts on like what your different disciplines ask of you and how you feel about that. Is that any better, any clearer?
I think I've like come to a place where it's like, what am I asking of my, like, I just want to care about what I care about and like get and do what I need to do. That I just sort of right now, but I can't answer that question in different ways. I think COVID in particular and kind of shifted things for me in terms of asking questions about what I really needed to do with my artistic energy. And I didn't during, like, I guess when when that happened, I was looking for community in all kinds of different ways. And I felt like I do need to experience community, but I didn't want to be planning and working on something that was socially engaged or another big thing or just some larger project, because I needed that time to just start experimenting again, start experimenting with image making in particular. And yeah, it has to do with a certain freedom and a certain sense of like ease and just yeah, a different quality of making than perhaps what's been required of me to sort of fulfill like a goal or sort of end, you know, a goalpost of a project. And I just didn't want that, and or didn't want to require that of myself at that moment, knowing that like for me social engagement really needs to come out of like a uh, you know, some real connections, and so and a real place of you know, honoring communities I'm working with. So part of it was also like finding some of that. And so I found during this time a virtual trans men's group that I've been working with like bi-weekly, and we, you know, come together to talk about vulnerable things to basically create a different kind of masculinity. And that work has been just like really, really soulful for me, really healing. And so I think it's part of that, just needing to kind of like slow down and recognize what would just be really good for me at this time to do when there's not a whole lot being required of me to you know, fulfill, you know, other expectations, and taking care of, you know, our home and family, and just, I don't know, trying to ease some of the situation with asking like deep questions about what I've needed emotionally and somewhat spiritually. So participating as well in some Buddhist groups, and just being more connected to that. And yeah, so image making has just been, and drawing and playing, just not really being super concerned about what's coming out. It's just been something I needed to do at this time. Not having a deadline. Let's see, there are a bunch of questions on here. Oh, what is next in my life? Hopefully just more good stuff. I mean, right now I'm teaching at the Art Institute. I'm the head of a social practice program at the Art Institute, Kansas City Art Institute, for those of you. Another train. But so I think that's really exciting, because that program is, we have a minor, and that's growing, and so I'm excited to be involved in that aspect of my life. And yeah, hopefully just being as connected to people and place and things, you know, I don't know. I don't have a concrete answer for what's next in my life in like a resume builder type way, but
Can you I could be projecting things onto you, but that mixture of play and control and bouncing back and forth from the little fermentation that I've done, it is a strange thing where you're one are sanitizing constantly, but then you're just like opening it up. I'm just thinking of those different roles when you're teaching or sort of like creating some sort of structure, like a socially engaged project. You don't necessarily get to. You're trying to create experimentation and happenstance, you know, to come out of it. But you yourself are doing a lot of really tightly controlled administration a lot of times, and so it seems like it makes sense that you would say, I want to just get back to making images and experimentation. Working with lots of people is good, but it's messy too. It's there's something nice about that. There was another question down here about the flower cards. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
Uh, well, like I said, my wife Lori got them. It's called the Flower Essences deck, and it's from, where is it from, Lori? Oracle in Kansas City. Um, yeah, there's. I mean, it's just like includes flowers. So it's, well, as it's described, it's for reference, research, or as an oracle deck for self-reflection and getting to know the flower essences. So you just, um, yeah, I just draw one and sort of use it that way. It's fun. It's kind of like a sort of version of a, sorry, one fell, version of a tarot deck.
I was sharing with Kelly the in the French Revolution they then developed they wanted a new calendar, you know, without all the saints days, so they developed the French Republican calendar where each day has a like a plant or a tool or something, and then the seasons are divided up, and one of the 3 month seasons is prairial, the month, and so then there's the yeah, every day I follow a little Twitter account that just tells me like what the plant of the day is or what the tool of the day is or something. It's a nice way. Some of them are only from France, so I don't have a connection to them.
That sounds awesome.
But yeah, it's the your kind of scientific, yeah, the science versus play thing. This is the more scientific side of things. There's another question here. What were you surprised by in the landscape, and comparing it specifically to being really close there in Kansas City, but yet a different sort of landscape?
Well, we have enjoyed coming here since we moved here, and I think I'll answer with what originally surprised us, and then maybe I can get to what's still surprising me. But what originally surprised us in the fall was to see that, you know, the tall grasses waving in the wind was so similar to ocean experience, and that it felt like an ocean in a way, and the sound of it, you know, rustling, and it was just sort of like just this incredibly peaceful horizon to look out on the grasses and feel that sense of depth and distance and life, you know, and just that same feeling of meditation that you get from looking at the ocean, looking at that horizon, that was so similar here, because well, I think we knew we were gonna, I'm just saying we because Lori and I share this, but that we were going to really like it here, but those things surprised us, that just how connected we felt, you know, in our souls to it. And I think now, you know, I haven't ever been at this time, so seeing all of the flowers in bloom and then going to seed, and what's this particular stage of the season. I guess that's surprising. It's like maybe I knew it would kind of be that way, but this particular patch of land and what I'm seeing here, and the sort of density, and just being like enamored. Like Lori was kind of my guide for the native plants, in particular, 'cause on our walks she can point everything out, and finding out, you know, compass plant and lead plant, and that lead plant is here means that, you know, things are doing well in that area, that the lead plant is this yeah, kind of harbinger of that good health. And those are some surprises. I was also surprised personally, I guess, at the bugs that were here. Just that I was really, really interested in the insects and larger things as well. Like the grasshoppers are just like insane and they look so cool. They're like just watching them eat and just I don't even know if I'd ever seen a grasshopper like the one I saw, but they're kind of like mechanical looking to me. I mean, from this perspective. Um, so yeah, just their joints and their particular patterning and yeah. So I was sort of fascinated with seeing all the creatures as well.
We're getting close to an hour, but yeah, if there are other questions, I'm yeah, really interested to hear if if people have anything else. Megan had to, she just in the chat, Megan Kaminsky was out for the residency a couple years ago or last year, maybe just last year. But she had worked on kind of a prairie divination deck where she had done some writings that seemed similar to your flower cards. So we'll have to check back and see if those are produced. Maybe we can leave them for people when they stay at Matfield Station there and do that. There's a couple more.
I saw Lori perk up. Yeah. I was texting Megan about that too. Yeah, I think it's still in the works, but it was a collaboration with an illustrator to produce this divination deck. It's really cool. So I agree with you, Derek. We should get a copy for Matfield Station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not encounter ticks. I don't think. And the grasshopper still occupying one of the chairs? Well, I don't know. I put a chair out there, like I put a wooden chair out there, and then I found a grasshopper just like taking off big bits of the chair and eating it. And I was like shocked that this grasshopper was just eating this chair. But yeah, that's what I was watching actually. So.
No way.
Fun prairie fact about grasshoppers. Apparently they eat more like grass than bison do, like collectively, which is
Crazy.
astounding.
There were some in the late 1800s. There were some grasshopper, I mean, basically plagues that came through, and some of the newspaper articles are pretty fascinating. And there's even a couple pictures of just, yeah, I mean, fence posts chewed to the ground, and oh, there was one newspaper, like the local paper around Hillsborough where I'm at right now, had said something about like there were approximately, you know, 250 billion grasshoppers came through on Saturday night, and we won't come down a single one. Like it was at least that many or something. So
Well,
glad that that's not happening right now here. Although I think that there have been some big locust plagues this year in other parts of the world.
Lori asked a bigger question that maybe like I can end on about making art from the heart versus the mind and emotional versus intellectual. Well, I hope that they're intertwined in a way. What I've been doing and the work I've been doing like on myself, both in my transition and like being in a body that feels really good to me right now, that is an experience that is new in relative terms, like a couple of 2 years now, and so through that process, the other things I've been working on and trying to get a sense of is how to just be more embodied and to understand what my embodied experience is. And I think, well, I want that to show up in my artwork, just that sense of trusting myself and having intuition. And I know there's a lot of times when I get caught in making art or making things that may not fully have that that sense of spirit or intuition behind it, and that's okay. um, but there's something about what I'm doing right now that just sort of folds into life practices that I'm asking for the ability to trust myself in my work and to make that from an embodied and heart-centered place, because that's what I'm trying to cultivate both in myself and in the world, and responding to what's needed right now, and like being kind to myself and not being overly critical about the work that I'm making, and recognizing where some of those things come from, that sense of control or criticality, coming both from education and then from white supremacy, or from supremacy, or what however we want to label it. So having this relationship that kind of breaks down and just becomes gentler with myself, in order to trust myself in the way that I want to make things. And that's maybe at times intellectual if it's something that I'm really thinking about, but then I hope that it sort of transfers into like a full experience.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing from your heart and your mind, and it's been nice to have you around, have your presence around town the last few days. Thanks to everyone else for making some time this afternoon to hang out with us, and yeah, come back on Sunday for some more.
Yeah, thanks so much everybody for showing up, and thanks to Eileen, like an old friend, showing up here. It's good to see you, and yeah, I'm just glad for everyone to be here today.
All right, have a good one, everybody.
Take care.